Everything transforms the second you are truly finished attempting, and the avoidant senses it immediately. Not acting, not playing it cool, not utilizing silence as a tactic, but genuinely emotionally finished pursuing. If you have ever loved a dismissive or fearful avoidant, then you already understand the cycle. You reach out, they retreat. You open up, they shut down. You try harder, they provide less. You invest emotional energy while they protect themselves behind distance, logic, and a cold exterior. This pattern can persist for months, sometimes years, until one day something inside you snaps, or perhaps awakens, and your energy vibrates differently. You stop explaining your perspective. You stop defending the connection. You stop waiting for them to miraculously become emotionally present. You simply disengage. And the instant an avoidant detects that shift, the moment they realize your heart is no longer tethered to their inconsistency, something within them breaks. For the first time, the control they have always relied upon feels like it is sliding out of their grasp. Why this moment impacts an avoidant so intensely is simple. Avoidants survive on control. Distance is their security. Emotional detachment is their comfort zone. And having someone chase them, even if they claim not to care, nourishes their sense of power. When you care too much, they feel safe. When you pursue, they feel in command. When you overextend, they relax, knowing you will fill the emotional void they create. But when that pattern fractures, when your desperate messages turn into silence, when your emotional intensity turns into composure, when your longing turns into neutrality, they notice. Oh, they notice. And the initial emotion they feel is not sorrow, it is shock. This is not how the script is intended to go. They have constructed their identity on the belief that love is overwhelming, suffocating, and dangerous. But they have also quietly relied on your presence, your energy, and your reassurance that they were desired without having to be vulnerable in return. Your detachment jeopardizes that entire system. Their first reaction is curiosity. Avoidants rarely move fast emotionally, so the primary thing they feel is inquisitiveness. Why are they so quiet? Why aren't they reacting? Why do they seem okay? They may send a casual text, a meme, a greeting at midnight, a random check-in, or a subtle provocation to see if you still respond emotionally, because your silence does not make them think you are angry. It makes them wonder if they are losing emotional significance. And for an avoidant, that is deeply unsettling. Then comes the second wave. The one avoidants try their whole lives to escape. When they finally sense that your care has vanished, something emotional awakens in them, something they are completely unequipped for. They begin to feel a strange mixture of abandonment, regret, and confusion. Even if they would never voice those words out loud, instead of expressing it directly, the feelings manifest in quiet, indirect ways. Sudden moments of nostalgia, unexpected compliments, random check-ins, or subtle attempts to reconnect disguised as casual banter. They might bring up old memories out of nowhere, or ask questions that hint they are wondering if you have moved on. Even irritation can surface, not because they are angry at you, but because they are frustrated with the shift inside themselves that they do not know how to manage. Your emotional detachment forces them to confront the truth they have been dodging, that they depended on your presence far more than they ever admitted even to themselves. And in that realization, their carefully constructed emotional distance begins to feel less like protection and more like loss. Your freedom becomes their trigger. Avoidants monitor emotional signals more than people realize. When they see you peaceful, you focused on your life, you living without them positioned in the center, you no longer waiting, it rattles them. Your indifference is louder than any argument you ever had, because for the first time they are seeing something they never expected. You are free. And that freedom forces them to confront a truth they tried to flee from. If they lose you, they cannot blame your intensity. They cannot blame closeness. They cannot blame pressure. They have to face themselves. Not every avoidant reacts the same. Some avoidants panic and reach out. Some soften and try to reconnect awkwardly, clumsily, but sincerely. Some try to act unfazed, pretending they do not care either. But even in that denial, they feel the shift. They see the loss. They replay moments in their mind. They monitor your social media. They wonder if someone else has your attention now. Some even date someone new. Not because they have moved on, but because they are trying to distract themselves from the sting of your detachment. The irony is this: your indifference exposes their real feelings better than your love ever did. The harsh truth most people do not realize is that sometimes avoidants come back, but not for love. Sometimes they return to check if they still hold emotional power, to see if you still respond, to confirm they were not replaceable, to soothe their ego. Other times, yes, it is real. Losing your energy forces them to face their own patterns, and for the first time, they want to try differently. But the key is, you are not waiting anymore. And that is the real power shift. Whether they come back with sincerity, games, or silence, your sense of worth does not move. You are no longer emotionally bargaining with someone who runs from intimacy. You have stepped into a different energy, one grounded in self-respect, clarity, and peace. What this moment means for you is significant. The moment you stop caring is not the moment you become cold. It is the moment you become whole. You stop chasing what is confusing. You stop begging for consistency from someone who fears it. You stop anchoring your worth to someone's emotional avoidance. You finally choose yourself. And here is the truth avoidants do not expect. When you detach, you do not just break the cycle. You expose it. You show them and yourself how much emotional labor you were doing. Their silence no longer hurts. Their distance no longer destabilizes you. Their inconsistency no longer feels like a verdict on your value. Instead, it becomes clarity, and clarity is power. The real turning point happens when an avoidant realizes you are done trying. They meet the consequences of the walls they built. They feel the emptiness those walls created. They grasp the cost of their emotional distance. They face the truth they have avoided for years. And whether they act on it or run from it, you have already outgrown the version of yourself who needed their validation. Your healing does not depend on their awakening. Your peace does not depend on their return. Your worth does not depend on who stays or leaves. Your turning point began the moment you stopped chasing love in unsafe places and started choosing love where it feels mutual. That is the difference. That is the shift. That is the power. This realization is the ultimate catalyst for change, not for them, but for the life you are finally reclaiming. When you walk away from the chase, you aren't just leaving a person. You are resigning from a role that was never meant for you. You were never supposed to be the architect of their healing or the hunter of their affection. As you step into this new space, the avoidant may watch from the sidelines, stunned by your lack of urgency. They are used to being the prize that is perpetually sought after, but now they are simply a spectator to your growth. This shift is jarring because it forces them to sit in the silence they once used as a weapon. Now, that silence belongs to you, and it isn't a weapon, it is a sanctuary. For the first time, the lack of noise between you isn't about their withdrawal, it is about your arrival at a place of self-sufficiency. You begin to notice that the world doesn't end when they don't text back. You see that your heart still beats, your days still shine, and your value remains untouched by their inability to mirror it. This is where true liberation lives. You are no longer waiting for a green light from someone who is perpetually stuck at a yellow one. You are driving your own life now. The avoidant might try to pull you back into the old dance, offering just enough breadcrumbs to see if you're still hungry. But your appetite for inconsistency has vanished. You have tasted the peace of your own company, and it is far more fulfilling than the anxiety of theirs. You are learning that love shouldn't feel like a marathon you're running alone. It should feel like a shared path. By choosing yourself, you are setting a new standard for how you will be treated moving forward. You are teaching the world, and specifically them, that your presence is a privilege, not a constant. Whether they eventually wake up to their own patterns or continue to hide behind their fortifications is no longer your concern. Your focus has narrowed down to the only person you can truly save, yourself. You are breathing easier. You are standing taller. You are finally, undeniably, free from the cycle. As you settle into this newfound independence, the gravity of your choice begins to ripple outward, affecting every aspect of your existence. You start to recognize that the energy you once spent decoding their mixed signals is now being redirected toward your own passions and purpose. The avoidant, sensing this definitive transition, may experience a profound sense of phantom limb syndrome. They are used to the weight of your expectations, and without that pressure, they feel strangely light, yet dangerously untethered. They might attempt to recreate the tension through subtle provocations or nostalgic baiting, but your lack of reaction acts as a mirror, reflecting their own dysfunction back at them. This is the stage where the power dynamic doesn't just tip, it dissolves entirely. You are no longer playing a game of emotional cat and mouse. You have left the arena altogether. The silence that once felt like a punishment from them has been reclaimed as your own personal boundary. In this space, you realize that your worth was never a variable in their equation. It was a constant that they were simply unequipped to solve. You stop looking for closure in their words and start finding it in your own actions. Every day you choose not to check their status. Every moment you decide not to wonder about their thoughts, you are reinforcing your own foundation. You are learning that a person who only values you when you are leaving is not a person who can love you while you are staying. This clarity is your shield. It protects you from the lure of their potential and keeps you grounded in the reality of their presence. You are no longer mourning the relationship you thought you had. You are celebrating the person you are becoming. The avoidant may eventually reach a crossroads where they must decide to do the work or remain in their fortress. But that decision no longer dictates your happiness. You have graduated from the school of unrequited effort. Your heart is no longer a waiting room for someone who is perpetually undecided. You are moving forward with a spirit that is unburdened, a mind that is clear, and a soul that finally knows what it means to be at rest. You are the protagonist of your own story again, and the plot is no longer centered on someone else's fear. In this final evolution, you realize that the greatest gift the avoidant ever gave you was the discomfort that forced you to leave. Their inability to meet your needs became the very fire that forged your new strength. You eventually reach a state of radical acceptance, where you no longer wish they were different, because if they had been just consistent enough to keep you hooked, you might have stayed small forever. Now you see their distance not as a personal rejection, but as a reflection of their own internal limit. You stop taking their fear personally. You understand that they weren't withholding love from you because you weren't enough. They were protecting themselves from a depth they haven't yet learned how to swim in. This perspective shifts you from a place of pain to a place of profound compassion, both for them and for the version of you that tried so hard to be heard. The avoidant may continue to orbit your life from a distance, watching your transformation with a mix of awe and regret, but the invisible thread that allowed them to pull on your emotions has been severed. You are no longer reactive. If they reach out, it doesn't send your heart into a frantic race. If they stay silent, it doesn't feel like a void you need to fill. You have become your own source of validation. The world opens up in ways you didn't think possible when you were hyper-focused on one person's closed door. You start attracting people who are ready, who are open, and who view vulnerability as a strength rather than a threat. You recognize that the peace you feel now is far more addictive than the highs and lows of the old cycle. You are no longer interested in being a fixer or a patient partner to someone who isn't participating in their own rescue. You are invested in mutuality. You are invested in the ease of a love that doesn't require a roadmap or a strategy. This is the ultimate completion of the journey. You didn't just survive the avoidance withdrawal, you thrived because of it. You have stepped out of the shadow of their doubt and into the sunlight of your own certainty. The cycle is not just broken, it is replaced by a life that is vibrant, sturdy, and entirely your own. You are home within yourself, and that is a place no one else can ever take away. As you step into this newfound clarity, you begin to observe the world through a lens that is no longer distorted by the need for external approval. The avoidance world is built on the preservation of the self through isolation, but your world is now built on the expansion of the self through authenticity. You realize that for a long time you were speaking a language they were committed to not understanding. The exhaustion you felt wasn't just from the lack of reciprocity. It was from the effort of trying to build a bridge by yourself while they were busy reinforcing the walls on the other side. Now that you have dropped your tools and walked away, the bridge is no longer your responsibility. You start to see that the void they left behind isn't a hole in your life, but a space that was previously occupied by anxiety, waiting to be filled with something meaningful. This is where your true interests, your neglected friendships, and your personal ambitions begin to flourish. The avoidant might perceive your growth as a personal affront or a betrayal of the dynamic they found so comfortable, but their interpretation is no longer a weight you carry. You have learned the difference between being needed as a safety net and being loved as a partner. One requires you to stay beneath them, while the other invites you to walk beside them. You choose the latter. As you move forward, you carry the wisdom of the cycle without the bitterness of the experience. You understand that some people are meant to be lessons and boundaries rather than partners for a lifetime. Your energy is now a precious resource that you distribute with intention, no longer casting it into a bottomless pit of someone else's hesitation. You are becoming a magnet for consistency because you have finally become consistent with yourself. You no longer entertain maybe or later or someday from people who are unwilling to give you now. Your life is no longer a rehearsal for a love that never arrives. It is a celebration of the love you have already found within. You are solid. You are certain. You are the eye of the storm that once threatened to pull you under. And in that stillness, you find a power that no amount of avoidance can ever diminish. You are not just moving on. You are moving up, ascending to a version of yourself that is fundamentally incompatible with anything less than total, transparent connection. When the avoidant attempts to reappear, as they often do when the vacuum of your absence becomes too loud to ignore, you meet them with a different kind of sight. You see through the surface-level charm and the nostalgic bait. You recognize that their sudden warmth is usually a reaction to their own discomfort, not a transformation of their character. In the past, a single text would have sent you into a spiral of analysis, but now it is merely data. You observe their return without the desperate hope that this time they have finally changed. Instead, you look for evidence of self-awareness, and when you find only the same old patterns wrapped in new words, you feel a sense of profound relief that you are no longer bound to that carousel. This is the moment your healing becomes concrete. It is one thing to detach when someone is gone, but it is another to remain detached when they are standing right in front of you, asking for the space you used to occupy. You realize that you have outgrown the person they are looking for. They are searching for the chaser, the fixer, the one who would bridge every gap, but that person no longer exists. By refusing to resume your old role, you force the avoidant to stay in the reality of their own making. You are not being cruel, you are being honest. You are no longer willing to sacrifice your nervous system to keep their ego comfortable. This boundary is the ultimate act of self-love. It signals to your own heart that you are finally safe with yourself. You begin to experience a quiet, steady joy that doesn't depend on the highs of a reconciliation or the lows of a withdrawal. Your life becomes a series of intentional choices rather than a series of reactions to someone else's fear of intimacy. You are building a future where the people you let in are those who can handle the light of your full presence without flinching. You have traded the thrill of the chase for the depth of the shore. You are no longer an observer of your own life, waiting for permission to be happy. You are the creator, the participant, and the final authority. The silence that once felt like a desert has become a lush garden where your true self is finally allowed to breathe, to stretch, and to stay. You have reached the point of no return, where the only direction left to go is toward a horizon that is wide, open, and entirely yours. This new perspective fundamentally alters the landscape of your daily existence, turning what used to be a battlefield of anxiety into a sanctuary of purpose. You begin to notice that the frantic urgency which once defined your emotional life has been replaced by a slow, deliberate confidence. In the past, your mood was a reflection of their engagement, a flickering candle at the mercy of their unpredictable winds. Now, you have become the sun, generating your own light and warmth regardless of who chooses to stand in it. The energy you used to waste on hope is now invested in action. You find yourself pursuing goals you had sidelined, speaking truths you had suppressed, and occupying space you once tried to shrink. The avoidant may still be a memory, but they are no longer a haunting presence. They have become a neutral fact of your history. You realize that the intense chemistry you felt with them was often just the adrenaline of uncertainty, a physiological response to the threat of loss, rather than the comfort of true connection. With this realization, your nervous system finally begins to regulate. You start to crave peace over passion and reliability over intensity. When you eventually encounter someone who is emotionally available, it might feel strange at first, perhaps even quiet or boring compared to the old chaos. But you quickly recognize this boredom for what it actually is: safety. You are no longer drawn to the mystery of a closed heart because you have discovered the beauty of an open one. You find that you can speak your needs without a script, express your fears without a strategy, and exist in a relationship without a mask. The avoidance departure was not a tragedy, but a necessary clearing of the ground so that something sustainable could be built. You are now a person who knows how to stay, not out of fear or obligation, but out of a genuine desire for mutual growth. You are no longer looking for someone to complete you, but for someone to witness your completeness. The journey from the chase to the shore is finished. You are standing on solid ground, looking out at an ocean that no longer threatens to drown you. You are the master of your own depth, the guardian of your own peace, and the author of a story that is finally, beautifully, under your control.